Hi there, I'm Allison Reeves, registered clinical counselor in private practice up in this beautiful oceanside area. So here I am speaking to you as another caregiver, and I really want you to know something. Caregiver health is incredible. And so one of the things that we can do when we're doing anything about language is when we're talking to ourselves inside of our head, or when we're talking to another person, perhaps the person we're caring for, but also maybe just someone else. We actually believe what we hear. We believe what we say. So as a mental health professional, I want to give you some kind of strategies, some tips to really change kind of the way we box ourselves in inadvertently, or we trap ourselves. You know, the person you're caring for, whether or not you love them, whether or not you had a troubled relationship before, maybe you had a fabulous relationship before, I encourage you to come right into the immediacy of the moment and recognize that you're on the same side, because it's the two of you against the disease. Whether it's Parkinson's or MS or anything else actually, perhaps it's against dementia or Alzheimer's, or maybe it's against osteoporosis. It's the two of you against that. So it's not so much where it's the negative aspect about going after the other thing, it's bonding the two of you. So in your language, when we become kinder to ourselves and to other people, when we slow down, it actually really improves our communication and our language. Now, I have a big belief in kindness. I find that it transforms even the hardest situations dramatically, and it improves people's lives dramatically. So language, I want you to do something. I actually encourage you to. You don't have to, of course. This is your life. You can do whatever you like. However, I encourage you to actually start paying attention to what your language is like inside of your head. I have a funny way of talking about it with people when I just think if all our thoughts were actually broadcast, we would be horrified, because people tend to be extremely harsh, extremely vile, extremely loud, very, very vindictive and nasty and cruel on the inside. Not everyone, a lot of people do, and you are human. Okay, so what happens is we have this tendency to think, oh, I'm never going to get it. Okay, or again, come on, I'm a bright person, I should be able to get over this. All of this sort of language. So one of the ways we can start instilling compassion and kindness is with our tone of voice. Actually, it's becoming aware and starting to acknowledge and accept that that's the way we've been speaking to ourselves, and to also open it up so that we're a little bit kinder. If you can imagine, we would probably intervene if we ever heard anyone speaking to a child like that, or speaking to another person like that. However, we find ourselves doing that nastily to ourselves frequently. And you can intervene at any point in time. This is the one thing about language. Most of us, psychologically, okay, most of us think that everyone is really paying attention to us. Actually, they're not. They're really paying attention to themselves. They will hear you. They will notice. However, we find ourselves always first and foremost who we pay attention to. So we're concerned how other people think of us and all of that. When you're speaking to another person, it's rather funny what happens. For most of us anyway, when we try this, and you might want to simply experiment for this next week, for example, is to just notice what it's like when you catch yourself speaking in a certain way. Even if it's just on the inside, it might be on the outside. When you catch yourself and you just kind of stop it for a moment and just reword it in a kinder way, in a way that your, quotes, mother, that mythical mother who is always wonderful and fabulous and was helpful and everything like that. I mean, it's the archetype, right? So what's going on here is that I want you to simply become kinder to yourself. When you become kinder to yourself, what tends to happen is we become more compassionate. When we're more compassionate to ourselves, we tend to be more compassionate to others. And it doesn't always work the other way around. And I'll actually let you know why. at least part of the reason as to why, is when we're being compassionate to another person, we are putting on a role, we're putting on a job, or we're putting on a mask. We might believe in the mask, I'm not saying that it's erroneous, because it isn't. What happens though is that doesn't talk about our language inside, which can still be, you still didn't do it right, you didn't do it well enough, you still flubbed up, or whatever. So when we do it from the other way around, from the inside to the outside, what we tend to do is we slow down. I'm going to keep on coming back to that notion for language. Language is really, really important because we really do want to become more accurate. So when we use words like always and never, and you might have heard this before, those aren't very helpful words. I mean, you can use that for terms of gravity, okay? Or you can use it in terms of, well, every morning really does arrive, or every evening really does arrive, and the stars do come out at night, even though they were always there. What goes on is that I want you to know that there's certain words that tend to clue us in that we're trapping ourselves. Always, never, shouldn't, should. Sometimes even the words can't. It's quite inappropriate. It's not actually accurate enough. The word would actually probably be won't rather than can't. Because can't is speaking about a disability, that we're unable, not that we're unwilling or that we don't want to. So language really matters. There's another aspect of language, and that's when we tend to over-exaggerate or when we tend to minimize. It's very difficult to come right in on the present day to what really is happening. And there's a lot of language that we don't even use. We tend to use words to denote all sorts of subtleties, like anger. We might actually only be irritated or miffed, or we might be enraged and we're really off the wall, so we're literally enraged. We've got such vigor, we're vile, we're venomous, things like that. Or when we're happy. How many other words could we really use that would be more discreet, more specific? That will help us. Because what we tend to do is have these 5 or 6 terms and we use them all the time. We don't go into the intricacies, the subtleties, and that's predominantly our culture, because language is always reflective of the culture, and in our Western culture we don't tend to be very, we don't tend to have a very large vocabulary for feelings. You should see beginning grad students in counseling. Hilarious or what? I mean, real difficulties in figuring out what the words are for the feelings, for the emotions, because we're so used to just using those few basic words. Yeah, I'm happy. Oh, I'm fine. By the way, fine isn't an emotion. Or I'm angry. I'm sad. Well, it would be almost impossible if you weren't sad all the time. Behind the scenes maybe. However, sad is pretty normal when you're actually watching someone being unable to do something or be able to live the life the way they want to, things like that. Or perhaps even the life that you wanted to lead. You might be very sad. You might be very unhappy about that. All sorts of different words. And those are only a couple, okay? So what happens is we want to become more accurate with our language, however, kinder as we're learning how to do that. And really listening to ourselves. Just noticing what are some of the tones of voice we use. Because one of the things that happens as children, for example, we might hear the guidance from somebody, like to look to the left and right before crossing the road. Otherwise, I'll tell you what you should be doing. We use all that sort of stuff. Well, we're little kids when we hear that. And it changes as we grow up. We start to hear those tones of voices to what we should be and shouldn't be doing. And really it was only meant with the idea of not to be killed, not to die by crossing the road and getting schmucked by a truck. So we change the tone of it. And we feel like a little kid then when we start to hear that tone. So I want you to know something. It really behooves us to become an adult in our own skin and really get to that point of just finding what really fits. When I was saying earlier that not everyone really is listening to you, you know, we're always only just listening to ourselves, if at all. We might be only just thinking about what we're about to say, not what we had just said. What goes on is that you can actually catch yourself mid-sentence, mid-word even, and change it and make it more accurate, make it softer, make it kinder. I encourage everyone to do that because I don't think we can actually have enough kindness in this world. There's a huge power behind that of kindness. It starts to make our relationships a lot better. You can even imagine this yourself, for example. Remember a time when somebody was kind to you in their words. Remember a time when people weren't kind to you. They might have used really vile words like lazy or boring. They might have used words like you can't do anything or I can't stand you, things like that. I want you to remember what it was like when you actually heard those words, because they hurt. And they only hurt because of how we interpret them. They hurt nonetheless. Rarely does a person who gets told that they're lazy feel good about it. Rarely does a person feel happy when somebody says, I can't stand this anymore. Okay? It might be totally accurate that someone can't stand it anymore. What's it like for another person to actually hear that? So we want to start becoming aware that our language has an impact on another person. We have no control over how it's being heard or how it's being interpreted. However, I want you to ask yourself, how would you feel? Okay? Are you happier? Are you feeling healthier? Are you feeling more full, more robust? Or are you feeling less full, less robust? And simply because we believe our own thoughts, we believe what we say, we believe what we hear, it makes it a lot easier when we're kinder. So even though you really struggle with everything on your plate, I'm just so happy to know you. Now that's a straight statement. Even though you can't tie your shoelaces anymore, you know, you are so run off your feet and you're just so angry all the time, I still wish you were just, you know, noticing that you're a lovely woman or you're a lovely man, and I'm just so glad you're in my life. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being told as a caregiver that you're doing all the right stuff, even if the other person might do it differently. Imagine being told, I appreciate you and thank you. Those simple words can have such power. So one of the things you can start doing, if you're not hearing it from outside, you can actually start putting it forward inside, which is, you know, I know that I'm doing a good job even if I'm not perfect. I'm actually really happy that I'm doing this. It's hard and I'm sad. And I'm also thrilled with what I'm doing. This was a really good thing to do. I wonder if other people will do this for me when I can't do for myself. You know, you can use all that sort of language and it's just a much more opening style. So I encourage you to just become aware of your language, okay? Now, if this pilot study really takes off, I'm going to have oodles more videos on language because language is such a big thing. And there are many different ways of actually addressing it. And I'm just skimming the surface right now. However, I really wanted to make this 15-minute video worthwhile. And I hope you listen to it again and again and again and find some more tips.